loud. Boom, we're recording. And we have about a minute before we get going, before we start roll call. So talk amongst yourselves for about, well, another 45 seconds and we'll get going. It's such an honor and such a pleasure to be here again on a Monday night, week 3. How exciting. We made it to week 3. Who knew? Wow. Wow. Boom. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Almost there. Okay, let's see here. Six, 9, 5. 9, 6, 8. 5, 5, 2. Give that a try. Okay, that's our room number. Well, good evening, everybody. This is Tommy Rosen, and I'm beyond excited to be with you here this evening. It is just a tick past 5 p.m. on a Monday evening here in August, and this is week 3 of the Recovery 2.0 global membership platform. It's been an exceptional week on this end. I'm hoping for you as well. Let me get a little list of where you guys are from. What I'm seeing so far, I've got folks from Pittsburgh, Montreal. I've got folks here from Millville, New Jersey, Stamford, Connecticut, Winnipeg, Oklahoma, Millville, New York City, Liberty, Tennessee. What else do we got? Remember, Memphis, Baltimore, San Jose, Maryland, Lawrence, Kansas, Gardner, Las Vegas, Guaynabo, Puerto Rico, Bienvenido, Ellicott City, Maryland, Virginia Beach, Luis Alvarez, mi hombre, mi amigo de Puerto Rico, Devon, UK, Delaware, Tucson, Arizona, Greenville, South Carolina, Huntersville, North Carolina, Calgary, Alberta, Albertson, New York, Quebec City, Ohio. What's up, hermano? Debbie from Duluth, how's it going? Welcome, you guys. Incredible. Incredible. I love seeing where we're all from, and it's just exciting. Are you in? We good? Okay. All right. So without further ado, wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, please put your feet flat on the floor. And sit up so that your spine is straight. And you might decide to have your thumb and forefinger together if that's comfortable for you. And you might decide to rest that palms face down on the knees or palms face up, whatever's comfortable for you. Allow the eyes to close gently. Allow the shoulders to relax and notice that the heart is open. Feel the feet on the floor. There's a sense of support. And draw your gaze inward. Release the attachment to the outside world. And draw your attention inward toward the breath. With each inhale, simply notice that you're inhaling. With each exhale, noticing that you're exhaling. Deep inhale. And a full exhale. Deep inhale. And a full exhale. Deep inhale. And a full exhale. Deep inhale. Full exhale. Your deepest inhale that you can take now. And your fullest exhale. Beautiful. Come with the eyes open. Good evening. Thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you for your commitment to your recovery. Thank you for your commitment to each other. Thank you for your commitment to this community. Thank you for your commitment to improving and always being in this state of change, this evolutionary movement forward. In addiction, we stop that movement, or we try to hang on to what is, rather than being in a state of flow and going along with things. We try to control and manipulate the external world, mainly because we haven't yet developed a powerful connection to the inner world. There's a great yogic saint named Swami Rama. Swami Rama said, we have to become masters of the two worlds, the inner world first, then the outer world. Earlier, another master named Jesus said, as within, so without. Also said, behold, the kingdom of heaven is within. Now, that concept of inner world and outer world, and that somehow the inner world could actually affect, if not actually sculpt and shape the outer world, is the topic of spirituality. Spirituality is this investigation into the unseen parts of life. And in order for us to even begin tonight, to be open to this kind of a presentation and to what will take place here between us, we have to first accept that there is something going on that we can't see, that we can't perceive with the five senses, that there is an aspect of our existence and of our life that is there, is perceptible on some level, even if not by the five senses. And that our work, in fact, here in this human framework, is to develop a relationship with the unseen. And so I thought I would begin tonight with a quote from this incredibly beautiful poem from the Sikh tradition. And the poem is called Japji. And Japji is a long poem. It would take 20 to 30 minutes to recite from beginning to end. And it's said to contain the total sum of information with regards to relationship between man and the infinite. That is to say, man and higher power, man and great spirit, man and God. So this poem tells the story of the soul in its relationship with God. So good place to start for us tonight. This is just a little tiny excerpt from Japji. You may live through all the ages, or even 10 times more. You may be known by everyone. People may even follow you around. You may be well thought of and praised throughout the world. But if you don't see the unseen, then none of it matters. That's a powerful statement. And what it is basically saying to us is, as human beings here on this planet, our effort, the most meaningful effort that we can engage in, one of the most necessary parts of our existence, is to develop this relationship with the unseen. This is spirituality. And since there's so much confusion and so much pain around the word God, and that it gets mixed in with the idea of religion, the concept of religion, and various concepts of spirituality, we really better get on the same page in terms of our definitions and in terms of what we're talking about here. So first, spirituality, which we just went over. This is an investigation into the unseen parts of life, nothing more and nothing less. Very important that you understand. As a facilitator or a presenter here, my agenda is not to get you to see anything in particular, and it's certainly not that you should see anything the way that I see it. The goal here is for you to develop a connection with the innermost part of yourself, so that in your journey through life, the divine or the spirit or the unseen aspects of life will begin to present themselves to you in their unique way that they will present themselves to you, which will be different than the way they present themselves to me. Although we can connect and we can compare notes, there is no right and there is no wrong in the perception of the unseen. It responds each of us to each of us individually as it will. That's the nature of infinity. It has infinite manifestations. But the goal is for all of us to open our mind and to open our heart and to be available to what life shows us. If only we can just be available and open to what life shows us, with guidance, we can begin to understand and develop this connection with the deeper meaning, the unseen parts of it all. Okay, now with religion. Religion usually takes place when a group of people gather around a teacher and or a teaching. And that teacher usually puts out a teaching, and the teaching is referred to as the doctrine. So religious people have gathered around a particular doctrine that has meaning for them, that carries weight for them. They may have gathered around a particular teacher because that teacher's teachings have weight for them, and they find community together in the interpretation or in the common interpretation of that doctrine. Well, it just so happens that human beings interpret the doctrine in a whole bunch of different kinds of ways. And so you get different kinds of religions. And you get different kinds of doctrines that come from different teachers. Now, as we're talking about the natural mystic, which is the topic of tonight's conversation, which is the door of spirituality, the door opening to spirituality, important that we understand that there may be a difference between religion and spirituality, although not necessarily. I find that in my travelings through the world, in my conversations with many different kinds of people, religious, atheist, agnostic, spiritual, non-spiritual, practical, logical, magical, and everything in between, people have different interpretations of life. They have different interpretations of their own experience. And all of us, every one of us, is influenced by family, culture, genealogy, food that we eat, the media that we watch, the environments that we find ourselves in, and of course the community of people that we're around. We'll be deeply influenced by all of those things. Those are the inputs, right? We're going to be influenced by those factors in our life. As such, I have met people who have certain ideas about God that maybe resonate with mine. I've met people that don't have any ideas about God because they don't think that exists, and that's certainly fine. I've met other people who insist that their way of looking at God and religion and spirit is the only way, and that usually doesn't work for me just because of what I said earlier about in my opinion, spirituality and life presenting itself to each of us individually in a way that only we can understand. So what's the point here? What's the purpose here? Each of us has to become a scientist of life. We have to explore for ourselves what these deeper concepts mean for us. I would say to you, don't believe anything that I say, but do look for a feeling either coming from that is a result of you listening to me or any other teacher or person that you get in front of, friend, family member. When somebody speaks truth, there's a certain resonance. And I don't mean truth like a relative truth, but I mean an absolute truth, like saying that, every human being has love in them. That's a truth. One doesn't really argue that. Every human being has the capacity for love, and every human being has the capacity for healing, and every human being has the capacity to unlock potential in their life. So as you're listening, look for a feeling, that resonates with me, or that doesn't resonate with me, but that's interesting, or I don't even find that interesting. Let's see what's coming next. So this is all just simply saying, take what makes sense and leave the rest. In my conversations with people, what I have found is the main difference between religion and spirituality ultimately is that religion is looking for truth in a particular doctrine, mainly focusing its vision on one doctrine, which is not right or wrong. That's just the way it is. That's what people have been drawn to do. And if a doctrine carries truth within it, then a person's attention upon that doctrine will allow them to extract the truth from it, and it will help them move forward in their life according to that truth. And they'll be able to extract that truth usually because they have a wise teacher. They have a wise teacher helping them. Spirituality, on the other hand, is usually a little bit less focused on one particular doctrine, but a little more focused on this idea of the unseen in general. So a religious person might say, well, I'm looking for the truth, and I look for it in the doctrine of Jesus, or I look for it in the Talmud, or I look for it in the Quran, or I look for it in the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib. Whatever the doctrine is, the religious person is looking to that particular doctrine for their sense of understanding of the truth. Absolute truth. Wonderful. Spiritual person, meanwhile, is saying, well, I see the truth in the teachings of Jesus. I see the truth in the Talmud. I see the truth in the Quran, and I'm seeing that these truths all seem to show up in all of these different doctrines. I see the truths in the 12 steps. I see the truths in smart recovery. I see the truth in Buddhist philosophy and in refuge recovery. I see the truth in the path of yoga and meditation, and I love how the path of yoga and meditation seem to invoke the same kind of truths as I see in the 12 steps. Wow, what a powerful complement to each other. The spiritual sort of perspective is, I can look to any doctrine that is a doctrine that contains truth, and I can extract truth from it. I'm not specifically focused on one particular religion. Now, does this mean that a religious person can't be spiritual? Of course not. Religious people can be the most deeply spiritual people. Spiritual people can also be religious people because they decide to focus on one particular path, one particular religion. And they also derive community from other members, other congregants of people who congregate around the same doctrine. So what I'm hoping this will do for you as we set up our understanding of spirituality tonight is religious people are neither right nor wrong. Spiritual people are neither right nor wrong. Our job as yogis, our job as people on a path of discovery is going to be to discover. We're looking for truth. And we're looking for that feeling inside where we can say, wow, this resonates with me. That really resonates. I feel connected because I've heard that truth. I feel like I'm closer to the truth. Now, I'll tell you a story. Maybe you guys can relate to this. So my theory is that all of us at some point in our discovery are gonna come upon codependency. And codependency, for me, we're just going to use Nikki Meyer's definition, which is the disease of the lost self. That we're confused about who and what we are. And so in our primary relationships, we might have some confusion about where we end and another person begins. And we might be in a weird dynamic of power where we've given ours away. Our power and our grounding is dependent upon how another person perceives us. Codependent relationship. And I believe that the codependency might have been there before the drugs and alcohol and before other addictive behaviors come in, because that codependency is so painful. It coming from this sense of separation, a sense of a misunderstanding of who and what we are. And then we start looking to the outside world to solve the issues of the inside world, which of course can never come to pass. So in my life, in my worst codependent relationship, at the end of it, really, which was a bottom for me 9 years into my recovery, I experienced that unbelievably painful, death-defying bottom where you, once again, even though it wasn't drugs and alcohol, I would say to myself, I can't go on like this, but I don't know how else to be. I don't know what else to do. Well, at that moment, I had, by this point, it was sort of a year into this, into this pain, and I had exhausted my friends' patience. I had spoken to every friend I could possibly speak to, and I've told them every detail of the horror show I was going through, and they all basically said to me, listen, whatever it is that you need, we're not going to be able to help you. You're beyond our ability to help you at this point. And so I went and I opened up a book by Rumi, the Sufi poet from the 13th century. And I read this book, and every word of his poems rang to me as love-filled, healing, connection. It was as if he was sitting next to me at a table and said, pushed a book across the table to me and said, read this, what do you think of this? And I would read his words, and I would read about love, and I'd read about his love of God. Now, I wasn't at that moment. I wasn't like particularly connected to God or thinking about God. Sure, I'm working with my higher power, trying to get into alignment. But here's a poet who in the most extraordinary language was expressing his devotion to God. And somehow it got me through the roughest patch of my life. Somehow just those words got me through the roughest, most painful, most lonely time of my life. And I didn't have to have another person. What was it about his writing? What was in there that was so meaningful to me? He was talking about the truth. Not the truth from any one particular doctrine, but just the truth. And I started to open up, and I started to be healed, and I started to feel the resonance of those words in my heart, in the energetic part of my body. But I wasn't done looking to the outside world yet. You see, I hadn't completely healed, and I wasn't finished looking for escapes and looking for that escape hatch. So, after I was healing that last painful codependent relationship, I was also acting out in other addictive ways around money and around cigarettes. And with each addictive behavior, I found myself looking to the outside world for a solution to a problem that was inside and could only be solved in the inner world. How do you solve it in the inner world? You must turn your gaze inward. You must develop a relationship with the unseen. It's so counterintuitive because we think, well, if it's unseen, then how am I going to develop a relationship with it? What am I supposed to do? How am I going to actually get that? If it's unseen, how will I ever know if I actually do have a relationship with it? Well, the answer to that is exactly in what I described, what was happening for me when I was reading the words of Rumi. And by the way, if you guys are not familiar with Rumi, R-U-M-I, please look deeper. Check into it, because it's some powerful stuff. And he touches on the truth. And if you're a religious person, reading truth in any doctrine is only going to bolster your own connection to your own path, because you're going to see truths expressed in many different paths. And what that's going to do is that's going to create connection between you and other people from different paths. And that's going to bring compassion as you understand another person's choices. You're going to start to understand, wow, the truth of my particular path is also the truth over here. Now, in the last couple weeks, in our Facebook page, there were some challenging posts that people put up. And they put it up about somebody expressed something negative about the 12 steps, and they obviously had an experience, a negative experience there, and it brought about an absolute hurricane of responses. And you know, the fact is, we have an opportunity in our community to be supportive of each other, to be exploratory, to be questioning and curious without putting anybody's choices down, right? So I pulled down that thread off our Facebook page because I found it to be unhelpful. It's not that I don't want there to be open discussion, but here was a person who had put down the 12 steps, which many people in our community have benefited from. And naturally, you know, just to put down, to make a blanket statement about any particular path, naturally is going to offend the people who have actually directly benefited from that path. So you see, in our exploration of spirituality, what this is going to do is we're going to create unity by recognizing the differences between us. We create unity by seeing that, hey, you know, this person chose this path and it revealed this truth to them. I choose a completely different path and I got to the same truth through my path. Which one of our paths is better? Well, of course, neither. Right? This is about unity. This is about yoga, or that idea of union, of oneness, of connection. Now, I don't know about you, but I look out in the world and what I see is division. And there's division on this very topic of spirituality. Religious people want to be right. Spiritual people want to be right. Atheist people want to be right. Agnostic people want to be right. And I'm just asking us all to make room for everybody to be right. Now, we get into some trouble when people start telling other people what to believe, which is a very un-yogic concept. A lot of people get weirded out around this idea of a guru. Oh, I have a guru. What does that mean? Does that mean you blindly listen to what the guru tells you to do? No. If you have a real teacher in your life, which is a real guru, somebody that carries you from darkness into light, and that can be a human being or it can be a doctrine. Anything that moves you from darkness, ignorance, into light, awareness. If you have that person or that text in your life, any real guru makes you turn your gaze on your own experience and turns your focus to the inner world. Because this is where your exploration is going to have to take place in order for you to learn and grow. You will not be able to be told what to believe. And if somebody tries to tell you what to believe, ultimately, that is not going to end well for that relationship. That is not going to end well for anybody. The only way that we can move forward as individuals and as people is to become scientists of our own experience. And it takes, whether you're a person getting sober from alcoholism or drug addiction or any other addiction, it takes that kind of a teacher, whether that's a sponsor, a therapist, a counselor, a guide, a yoga teacher, a mentor of some kind. Eventually, someone is going to have to say, well, what do you think? What is your experience? What have you learned from your own personal life? And the more you study that, the more you're going to learn and the more you're going to become aware. And this is true knowledge, because it's not knowledge based upon the hearsay of another human being or the attempt to manipulate or control by another human being. This is you. This is your own experience, and that's where your power as an individual is ultimately going to come from. As the world and life reveals itself to you by the grace of the love of a teacher who is helping you to see for yourself and to learn for yourself what life is showing you. That is evolution. It's the opposite of addiction, which is stagnancy. Does this make sense to you guys? I hope so. So we've got a whole bunch of comments here. You guys are getting this. Okay. Good. Good. Yeah, good. So we're in a good spot. So my spiritual journey begins with confusion, begins with questioning. Truly, I don't have the answers. That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm confused. Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to develop and use my unique gifts? Hopefully, you recognize, if you're in this room by now, there's 155 people here. Hopefully, you recognize, if I continue to use drugs and alcohol, if I continue to be in codependent relationships, if I continue to act out in sexual addiction, gambling addiction, money-based addictions, food-based addictions, that is going to keep me at a frequency where I'm going to have a lot of trouble evolving forward. I will not yet have learned the lessons that those particular behaviors have to teach me. When I learn the lessons of those particular behaviors, it's almost like a gateway is opened, and you can now walk through that gate to the next level of understanding. This is why one of my teachers, Anand, says, don't hang on to any particular level of awareness. There's always another one. So we have to understand we're in this continually evolving process. It begins with confusion and questioning. Stay in the questioning. Live your life. Be in the questioning. The great writer, Rainer Maria Rilke, says, you're so young. Live the questions today. And you might find that some distant day you've lived your way into the answers. And that's the only way it works for us. We know that because we feel that in our heart when we read those words. The only way forward is going to be through our direct experience. What happens if we continually avoid our emotional and our direct experience? What happens if we avoid the present moment? We never get to learn and grow. We stunt ourselves. Okay. So this path of spirituality, I'm going to make a statement which is now for me in the realm of personal opinion. This is my own experience, and you have to judge for yourself if this makes sense for you in your life. I believe that drugs and alcohol veil. I believe, generally speaking, they veil our senses and our awareness. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a place and a time in a person's life, in a rite of passage, in their adolescence, in their young adulthood, where engaging in drugs and even alcohol may have aided them in some way by helping them to release some bit of anger for a moment so they could see something more clearly. But if that behavior continues and continues and continues again, if they continue to return to an external substance to solve the riddle of their life, it is going to be veiling their awareness, lowering their awareness, and not increasing and opening up their awareness and their consciousness. Therefore, the reason to stay sober is not just because you might die if you don't. It's not just that you might be miserable if you go back. The reason to stay sober is because on this path of discovery, where we only want to engage in behaviors, we want to engage in a lifestyle that promotes our well-being, that opens up and supports greater consciousness and greater awareness. That is a very powerful catalyst for reaching long-term sustainable recovery. See, I'm not scared anymore about going back of what happened to me. I'm not in the mind of fearfulness about using. Instead, I'm in love with life today. I'm in love with my connection with myself today. I'm in love with the inner world, and I'm also in love, therefore, with the outer world, even the parts of it that challenge me. And believe me, they come up just all the time. So you see, this whole path of spirit is about an exploration, a scientific, personal exploration of what life shows you, and being around people that can help you interpret it wisely. And for me, when I got to Hazelden, which was the beginning of my recovery from drug and alcohol addiction, when I got there, I was thrown into a meeting right away. And at the end of that meeting, they said the Lord's Prayer. And everybody in the meeting said, or the facilitator of the meeting said, will you please stand up and join me in the Lord's Prayer? And I stood up, and because everybody else stood up. But my inner dialogue was, no, I'm not going to be joining you in the Lord's Prayer. Thank you very much. And let me just tell you where I've come to with that, because that will sort of sum up for you part of my experience in my own evolution of how I've come to understand and relate to spirituality. The Lord's Prayer at that moment represented to me religion, and I had prejudice against religion in general. The Lord's Prayer represented for me Christianity, and I wasn't born a Christian, and so that was even further from my mind. But it also represented this a very archaic way of speaking, and the language of it. I'm going to use some profanity. I try to tell you in advance when it's coming. The language of it really fucked with me. There's no other way to put it. So, that's where I was. So rather than listening to the words and being a scientist, rather than hearing it and trying to open myself to it and just feel what it feels like, it was impossible in that moment because I was shut down. I was closed down to it. That doesn't make me right or wrong, and that doesn't make anyone else right or wrong. That's just where I was at that day. Let's flash forward to the present moment. I started to look at ancient interpretations of the Lord's Prayer, which were written and then translated from the original Aramaic. I found great fascination in the differences of the interpretation of some of the ancients versus the interpretation that was passed down, which typically we hear in like a meeting format, right? And I really took to, first of all, I found that I had a fascination to study this stuff. Like it was interesting to me. But I took to what I considered to be a more original interpretation of the teachings, the doctrine that Jesus was putting out before there was such a thing called religion or Christianity or a church. It was just this guy who was a gifted master who walked the earth, and I like to get around those people. So if I could somehow like get through the teaching, so I could relate to the teaching and the teaching could relate to me in a way that I could hear it, that would be a real open-hearted, open-minded, spiritual and workable approach to these words. And our Father who art in heaven, big interpretation. How about Father Sky? Let's go with that. That's one way of looking at it. How about masculine and feminine energy of the universe? How about I bring in the feminine here? See, open for interpretation. I'm not looking at these words necessarily as the English words that I've been given. I'm starting to think about these words in a more exploratory way. What might this have actually meant thousands of years ago when words actually meant different things? I'll give you an example. So, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy names. All the names that anyone has ever had for the divine, I'm for that. Okay, that's where I'm at in my spiritual world today. I kind of like that. Wow, hallowed, sacred, special, um, something that's not mundane, something that can lift us up, something that could have a medicinal effect on our soul. I'm all for that. There's no part of me that's against that idea. But somehow, when it came down that day through the Lord's Prayer, man, I was against it. Just explaining that, there's an expanded way you can look at all words, what you're looking for, especially as a member of a community that's searching for the truth. You're looking for a resonance as you learn about the meanings of words and how they feel in your body and how they fall upon your consciousness at a certain moment in your development. Then these words fell on me and they just bounced off and I just rejected them. Today, I'm like, ooh, there's some juice, there's some juiciness here. And as you start to read different interpretations, you recognize there's not one way of looking at these teachings. There's infinite ways, and all you have to do is find the way that works for you. And by the way, if the Lord's Prayer is never going to work for you, that's perfectly fine too. Find another doctrine. Find another set of words. But where we get into trouble, where people end up doing things like relapsing or staying stuck in addiction, is they say, I'm going to use some profanity again, they say, fuck this. I'm not going to look at anything. Because these words didn't work for me, I'm going to reject everything, and now I'm not going to look, and now I've shut my mind to any possible doctrine of spirituality that could actually lift me up out of this current condition I find myself in. Why is this important? Remember what we said at the beginning, spirituality. Spirituality is to see the unseen. If we don't develop a relationship with the unseen, we're just floating around in this outside world and we've never made the connection. We never find out who we are. We never find out our Sat Nam, or the truth of our identity. The freedom that each of us has been looking for, the reason we alter our consciousness in the first place, is because we're looking for this, but we're looking for it in the wrong place. And we've been looking for it in the wrong place. Okay. So, the Lord's Prayer. If you look at each stanza, break it down, take what works for you. Investigate what these words actually mean, and you may find some very fascinating things. Let me tell you something that I found. There was a teaching, I'll go to another Christian teaching, because this is a very powerful thing that I learned that I want to share with you guys today. The Sermon on the Mount. Okay, you guys can read Emmett Fox's book, The Sermon on the Mount. It's a very popular book, especially among people on a path of discovery. And he really reframes a lot of these teachings. And the way he does that is he says, 2,000 plus years ago, when Jesus lived on the earth, there were different languages and words didn't mean what they mean today. And so you read on and here's an interpretation. So we all know about this wonderful saying, one of the Beatitudes, the meek shall inherit the earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. Now that's always been a confusing statement to me as a scholar, right? As somebody who's trying to study and understand what these things mean, because I'm looking for the truth. And I know that the 12 steps, which were very helpful to me, come and have a relationship with Christianity, even first century Christianity. As you start to study the steps, you learn about that. So I'm trying to understand, the meek shall inherit the earth. What's that mean? Am I supposed to be weak? If I'm a weak person, because that's what I understand as meek. Meek is small and weak, and then I'll inherit the earth, meaning what? I'm going to go to heaven, and then later on things are going to get better for me, even though they suck right now. Not something I'm interested in, and at best it confuses me. But then I come to understand the meaning of the word meek. 2,000 years ago, the word meek meant open-minded, open-spirited, open-hearted. So the meek. So the open-minded, the meek shall inherit the earth. Well, what is the earth? Does that mean riches? Does that mean some kind of wealth, a financial wealth? What does that mean? Well, on deeper exploration, we understand that earth 2,000 years ago actually meant the key to spiritual understanding. You would inherit the earth. You would inherit understanding. You would inherit the teaching. So let's look at it this way. The meek, the open-minded and the open-hearted will inherit or be able to understand the teaching. Now, I don't know about you, but all of a sudden I start thinking, I'd like more of this meekness. I'd like more of this open-mindedness. I would like to have the spiritual key so that I can look at a doctrine and I can extract the truth from that doctrine in a way that helps me continue along my evolutionary path and developing a relationship with the unseen. So that's an example of language being an issue. Now I'm going to bring it right home to you for all you 12-steppers out there. And anybody who's observed the 12-step world, but had issue with language within the 12-step world. Now, I sit here 26 years sober. I've been to, I don't know how many thousands of meetings over the years, talked to thousands of people, been a part of it, worked through the 12 steps many, many times. You might say it's a part of my DNA. It's just in me. And yet, there has never been a moment when I have been at a 12-step meeting and looked up on the wall at the 12 steps, which are usually posted right on the wall in any meeting, and not thought to myself, good Lord, if there's any newcomer in here that's looking up at that list of steps, how are they going to sit and get through this? How are they going to possibly? It's so intimidating. It's unbelievably intimidating. If you have any religious prejudice like I did, you'll just look at that and be like, oh my God, how am I possibly going to deal with this? Which is why it's so important to have somebody decipher and clarify and give you access to the teaching that is contained within each one of those steps. Because on the surface, it's some kind of religious cult at best. But if you go deeper, if you can be meek, open-minded, open-hearted, you will be able to access the truth of those teachings. How about the words that we use in meetings? A constant controversy. Oh, I notice you're not drinking. This happens all the time. I notice you're not drinking. Are you one of those sober people? Yes, I am one of those sober people. Oh, you go to those meetings? Yes. Hey, you know, I always had a question about those meetings. Could you tell me why people in those meetings always call themselves alcoholics or call themselves addicts? Now, there is no right, I'm telling you my opinion, there is no right and there is no wrong. We are dealing with a group of people in 12 steps who grow up together spiritually around this doctrine of the 12 steps, and the way they communicate and identify with each other is by referring to themselves as an alcoholic or an addict. That's a part of their understanding, and it is neither right nor is it wrong. But I just want all of us to just consider that that is a major point of controversy for so many new people who come. And for some old timers like myself who don't refer to themselves that way anymore. That's very confusing for people. What, are you not an alcoholic? You were an alcoholic before, but you're not an alcoholic now? You're an addict before, but you're not an addict now? So confusing, this language. And I would refrain from suggesting that there's a right way or a wrong way. Everybody must use language that makes sense for them. And we also, as we encounter new people who need a deeper understanding around this stuff, we want to be able to help them to understand without turning them off. Because very often I have seen people say, you know, can you call yourself, are you ready to call yourself an alcoholic? No, I'm not. And then a person might say, well then, you know, maybe this isn't the right place for you. And I think that's so the wrong approach. I think everybody has to come up with language that makes sense for them and they have to do it in the timing that's right for them. And in the meantime, we have to create space for people to have their own exploration. Just like I'm suggesting that you and I, we want to explore things as scientists. Well, we want to give other people the same right. If a person doesn't understand alcoholism, drug addiction, then let's explain it to them. If they then understand it and they don't feel like they are that, let's accept that. Or if we explain it to them and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I think I have this thing, we can then go a little further and say, oh, well, that's okay. I've had this thing too, and here's what my experience has been, and here's how I was able to navigate my way with a lot of support out of the darkness of addiction. You can do it too. All of this is to say, as we go down this path of relating to the unseen, as we go down this path of a deeper connection with, spirituality, if we're religious people, fantastic, and we want to derive a sense of community and well-being in our religious community. If we're spiritual and we're seeking and we're looking for truth in lots of different places or different doctrines, wonderful, great. If we're atheist and we are in that understanding that there is no God, or that doesn't make sense to us, or we're agnostic, we just don't understand which way this thing goes. All of these postures, all of these positionalities are perfectly legitimate. How open can we be? How loving and compassionate can we be with other people who present different religious ideas, even if they offend our own, even if they are not ours? How much understanding and lack of judgment can we bring to the situation? As we go down our path of spirituality, the more comfortable we become, the more we connect with the inner world, the more we develop this relationship, we'll start to see the outer world take a new shape. And it's beautiful. And it's going to make more sense than it has. Maybe we start to heal ourselves in some pretty profound physical ways, emotional ways, mental ways. We also find that we have more sensitivity, also more understanding. The sensitivity can be challenging because as we raise our consciousness to become more aware, we're also more sensitive beings. And it doesn't necessarily mean we become more tolerant. It may mean that we become more compassionate. And there's a big difference between tolerance and compassion. We may understand a person's position and we may completely accept them in being different in their understanding than we are in our understanding. And this, to me, is where we find conflict resolution, where we find unity, where we find diversity and inclusion, and where our world takes on a sheen that I think most of us would fight for and would like to have. In the world of addiction and recovery, I'll finish with this. We must not ever put another person down for a path of recovery and discovery that they have chosen. If the path works for them, let's learn everything we can about it and emulate the parts of it that make sense for us. If the path doesn't work for them, let's put our arm around that person and ask them if they would like a suggestion of another way. If they're open to it, wonderful. If they're not open to it, wonderful. It's okay. But this move to the inner world, this developing a relationship with the unseen, allows us to be more available, to be more effective, to be more fully ourselves in the outside world. Ultimately, we will find true recovery, sustainable, one day at a time, and we will find our mission, and we will get to live on purpose in a life beyond what we could ever possibly have imagined. You don't have to take my word for it. Just look to your own experience. And let's walk this together. In this community, this Recovery 2.0 community, this R20 community, let's walk it together each day and each week. This is why I say at the end of our meetings, stay on your recovery path. It might as well be stay on your discovery path. Ask for help if you need it. Whenever you need help, that just means it's time for another teacher. Ask for help. Whether that's asking me or a member of the Recovery 2.0 team, or a member of this community, or a therapist in your community, a sponsor, a teacher, whatever it is, ask for help if you need it. And never despair. There is a way through every block. That's a quantum physical concept. That's a truth. There's always a way through a block. We may not see the way at that moment in time, but if we stay on the path of discovery, the way that we needed to move will reveal itself, and we will find ourselves at that next place. So what I want to say is I'm thinking about doing a Q&A next week. In other words, this hour on Monday night, simply doing Q&A. Meaning, if you have a question that comes up around this topic of spirituality, recovery, religion, all of this, that's something that you really would like an answer to, you can write it right now in the Q&A box. There's a Q&A feature right on your page. I don't know where it is, top or bottom, but you can write it. Ask us the question. I will go ahead and grab all of the Q&A, all the questions that you've written. And next week, whether it's on this topic or another topic, if there's something burning for you, a burning desire of some kind, next Monday, we'll do a Q&A. Is that cool? You guys okay with that? So rather than a new presentation, because this is such an important topic, I think that we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask a question if they have it. And by the way, there's 162 people in the room right here. There's another 16 or 1700 of us not in the room tonight. So we're going to want to make sure that other people have an opportunity to see this, this presentation tonight, have it recorded, and then ultimately to ask the questions that they might have. So we'll be asking ourselves some questions this week in our Facebook page and in our group. And remember, in your posts, be uplifting. It's okay. If you want to debate somebody else's path, do it in another community somewhere else. I'm not saying leave our community, but if you're into debate and you want to debate about spirituality, do it somewhere else. This is a place where we are looking for what works, and we support everybody who either finds a way that works or who is suffering because they're on a path that isn't working. We want to help them all. So that's what I got tonight. There's a lot of Ask Tommies. Someone's asking about Ask Tommy. There's a number of Ask Tommy videos that are up in our community. Take a look at those. And ask your questions here. I see there's four questions in the Q&A right now. If any of you have any questions, type them in right now, and I'll grab them before we end our recording tonight. And I'll endeavor to do a Q&A next Monday night. This first month, by the way, you're getting a lot of me on Monday nights. In future months, as you know, we're going to be bringing in some teachers, some lecturers, some authors, and some other presenters to present to you on a whole variety of topics. I so hope you're getting used to the rhythm of this in our community, that every Monday night we get to meet together like this, and that it's of value to you. And what can I say? We're just going to keep doing this pretty much until you know, if you don't want it, then that would be a reason not to do it. But as long as you want it, we're here. And so grateful to be here. Please bring your palms together at the heart center. Allow the eyes to close, and let's close with the Recovery 2.0 final prayer. Universe, put me in the places you want me to be, with the people you want me to be with, doing the things you want me to do. Thank you for the joys and challenges of my life. Amen. So much love to each of you. Sat Nam. And I look forward to connecting this week, all week, in our Facebook community. And what do we got coming up? Oh, we have Kripalu. At the end of this month, who's coming? Kripalu, 4 days. 4 days of yoga, meditation, and recovery with me. Please come. Just look it up on our events page. It's all there. Kripalu. Wow. Great way to end the summer, you guys. Okay. So much love. I'm going to get the Q&A right now. I'm going to, let's see, I got to do all these screen shares. Okay. I think I got them all. Sending big love to you guys. Make it an incredible night, and we'll see you again. Sat Nam.